Welcome to Reformed Thinking. This is the deep dive, where we unpack sources to give you fresh insight and understanding. Today, we're taking a special dive into a really fascinating topic: how authentic emotion and, well, structured forms of expression relate to each other. It's a tension many of us feel, I think. This idea that true passion should be free flowing, maybe unrestrained, almost spontaneous. But what if there's actually a surprising connection here? What if genuine feeling actually flourishes when it's given a thoughtful, deliberate shape rather than being sort of squashed by it? Our aim for this deep dive is really to get to the core of this. We want to clarify how real emotion can truly shine when it's channeled through careful means rather than being, diminished. We're drawing from some very significant insights on this topic, particularly from a well-regarded author whose own background in ministry and writing gives him a rich vantage point. So let's get into it. Okay, so to kick things off, let's think about a widespread idea. Many of us instinctively lean towards the belief that for emotion to be truly real, it just has to come out spontaneously. Think about it. A burst of laughter from true joy or an uncalculated cry of frustration. That feels authentic, doesn't it? The very thought of shaping that feeling, of putting it into a specific structure, maybe like a poem or a formal prayer, it can seem to dilute its sincerity, make it feel less raw, less immediate. We often equate structure with something being artificial. But our sources challenge this intuition head on. They present a core argument that might just flip your perspective. It's this: there is no necessary contradiction between form and fire. Now, when we talk about fire here, we're talking about that intense passion and that genuine emotion, that burning feeling in one's soul. It's the inner drive, the real affection. The author posits that these two things, form and fire, they're not inherently at odds. Now, this author, he begins by laying out the potential pitfalls, the dangers that lurk at both extremes when we try to express our feelings. On one side, he points to the danger of what he terms formalism. This is where expressions become stiff, unnatural, perhaps even artificial. He gives examples like prayers or sermons that are simply read from a manuscript. The words might be perfectly sound, right? But if they lack the warmth of true feeling, the delivery can feel lifeless. It's like looking at a meticulously drawn map, maybe, but never actually experiencing the landscape it depicts. The form is there, it's precise, but the life, the genuine sentiment, it's missing. It ends up being a hollow echo. Then he flips the coin and highlights a contrasting danger: spontaneity when it lacks true passion. He describes this as resulting in lifeless, jargon-laden spontaneity. And this is a crucial distinction because it points out that simply being unstudied or unprepared, simply speaking off the cuff, doesn't automatically guarantee authenticity or impact. You might hear someone speaking freely, perhaps in a conversation or a public setting, but if their heart isn't truly moved, if there's no genuine feeling behind the words, well, it can come across as empty, just a stream of cliches or vague phrases. It's like that image of a river without banks. It just spreads out into a wide, shallow, muddy expanse, losing all its current and vitality. It's real in the sense that sounds are coming out, perhaps, but it lacks substance. And this leads us to what he sees as the central idea, the core principle. If the heart is truly aflame with passion, then no form will quench it. This sets up the central thesis for our discussion today. The actual condition of the heart, the genuine presence of that inner fire, is what matters most. The form itself, the structure, the language we choose, those are secondary. They are vessels, maybe channels, not the origin of the feeling.
That really is the key takeaway, isn't it? The true determinant of genuine heartfelt expression isn't the outer shell, the form we choose to use. It's much more about the inner state of the person expressing it. This source illustrates this limitation so vividly, describing it as a dry spring in the heart. Think about that image for a moment. If the very source of emotion, the spring itself, is dry, then no matter how you try to draw from it, whether through a rigid structure or a completely uninhibited, spontaneous outpouring, you're still drawing from emptiness. The problem isn't the bucket you see, or how you swing it. It's the absence of water in the well. This observation becomes even clearer through a real-world example, one that many familiar with theological literature will likely recognize. F. Bruce, a highly regarded New Testament scholar. His works, while intellectually rigorous and, well, immensely informative, were often perceived by readers as unnecessarily dry. Brilliant, certainly, but perhaps a bit sterile, lacking a certain warmth or passion that some might desire. Now, Bruce himself offered a reason for this perceived dryness. He stated quite candidly, "I do not care to speak much, especially in public, about the things that mean most to me." Ponder that for a moment. He made a deliberate choice, it seems, to keep his deepest affections, his most cherished beliefs, the things that truly stirred his soul, out of his public discourse, out of his published works. It was almost a conscious reservation. Our author offers a compelling counterpoint to this perspective. He states, for himself, it's actually the reverse. He says, I do not care to speak much, especially in public, about the things that don't mean most to me. This contrast is incredibly insightful for our discussion. If you intentionally withhold what truly matters to you, what genuinely moves your soul from your public expression, whether you're writing, speaking, preaching, or even just having a conversation, then your communication will inevitably lack vitality and feeling. It will come across as dry, regardless of how accurate or logical it might be. It's not just about getting the facts right, it's about conveying the spiritual weight, the personal reality of those facts. This highlights that the speaker's own emotional engagement with the subject matter, the actual condition of their heart concerning the truths they are presenting. That's absolutely crucial for genuine and impactful communication. It's not just about what you know, is it? But about how you feel about what you know, and whether you allow that feeling to shape your expression.
So if that's the core problem, a dry spring, maybe a heart that isn't aflame, how do we then cultivate that inner fire? And what does it look like when a heart isn't aflame, even if it tries to speak with apparent passion? We've all encountered communication that's technically correct but emotionally flat, right? We're maybe outwardly enthusiastic but feels hollow somehow. This makes me wonder about the practices or maybe even the disciplines that help the heart remain vibrant and authentic, ready to fill any form.
That's a vital consideration because it moves us from diagnosis to, well, application. Cultivating that inner fire often means guarding your heart, as Proverbs tells us, above all else, for from it flow the springs of life. For us as Christians, that means constant immersion in God's Word, fervent prayer, and genuine fellowship. These are the means by which our affections are stirred and sustained. When our hearts are nourished by these spiritual disciplines, the spring doesn't run dry. If the heart isn't aflame, you'll see one of two things, just as our author notes. Either stiff formalism, where the words are right but the spirit is gone, or a kind of jargon-laden spontaneity, which is just empty talk. It feels empty. It's like someone trying to perform a complex piece of music without having practiced. They might hit some notes, perhaps, but the soul of the music is absent. That makes sense. Think about a common experience. You prepare a presentation, you have all your points down, but if you don't actually care about what you're presenting, it falls flat. It feels like a lecture, not really a message. The words are there, the form is there, but the passion isn't. Conversely, you might try to speak off the cuff, truly spontaneously, about something you think you care about. But if that care isn't rooted in a deep personal connection to the subject, it ends up being just a string of uninspired thoughts. The fire isn't there to give the spontaneity real warmth or direction. So the cultivation is about tending the source, the heart, first and foremost.
Okay. With that strong foundation laid, let's turn to a biblical example that truly brings this idea to life. It shows us how structure and intense emotion can not only coexist, but actually enhance one another. I'm talking about the book of Lamentations. It serves as an astonishing case study in what we're discussing today. The first thing that immediately grabs you, that it hits you right in the gut when you read Lamentations, is just how intensely emotional it is. It's a book saturated with agony and fervor. This isn't just a sad reflection. It's a raw cry of people experiencing unimaginable devastation. You find expressions of extreme suffering throughout its pages. The weeping of Jerusalem, described as crying bitterly through the night. You sense the utter desolation that has fallen upon the city, the gnawing hunger gripping its people. There's grief so consuming that it even depicts the horrific, unimaginable scenario of mothers boiling their own children to eat them during the siege. This isn't just sadness. This is wrenching, desperate anguish. This is passion at its most unbridled, its most heartrending. On the surface, it truly feels like a spontaneous, uncontrolled outpouring of absolute devastation. Like a primal scream captured in words.
And this is precisely where the second observation comes in. An observation that is truly surprising given the raw, almost unrestrained emotional content you just outlined. Despite its immense emotional content, Lamentations is described by scholars and our author as the most formally crafted book in the Old Testament. This is where the seeming tension between form and feeling and its surprising resolution really lies. Let's delve into this intricate structure for a moment. Chapters 1, 2, and 4 each consist of 22 stanzas. This number, 22, is highly significant as it corresponds to the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And more than just being a numerical count, each stanza within these chapters begins with a different letter of the alphabet, forming what we call acrostics. This wasn't merely a literary flourish. In ancient Hebrew culture, acrostics often symbolized completeness, a kind of saying it all from A to Z. It was a way of conveying that the author had exhausted every possible angle of expression. It covered the subject in its entirety. So imagine the mental and emotional discipline required to articulate such unimaginable grief and horror, yet to contain it within a structure that speaks of totality. It's as if the very form itself underscores the inescapable, all-encompassing nature of their suffering. But Chapter 3 takes this structural brilliance even further. It is also composed of 22 stanzas, but it introduces an even tighter framework. Each of these stanzas has precisely 3 lines, and all 3 lines within each stanza begin with the same letter, following the alphabetical order. So it's a triple acrostic structure. What's truly remarkable is that this Chapter 3 is noted as the most personal and most intense chapter in the entire book. It is here that the author submits to the narrowest form in all the book, to this almost impossibly strict constraint. This is where you find verses like, "Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall," a deeply personal cry of anguish. And yet this is also where the peak of hope is voiced with, "Great is your faithfulness." Intense personal feeling, raw despair, and soaring hope, all contained within the most rigorous structure imaginable. Even Chapter 5, while it doesn't follow the acrostic pattern, still adheres to an overall 22-line structure, maintaining consistency with the formal design of the preceding chapters, almost as if it's completing the formal thought. When you bring all these observations together, you truly grasp the immense mental work involved in finding all the right words to construct 4 alphabetical acrostics. This was not a casual, unstudied act. It required painstaking effort, deliberate choice, and a submission to form. Yet, as you rightly pointed out earlier, the book radiates passion and heart. This serves as compelling evidence against the common idea that genuine heartfelt expression needs to be spontaneous. On the contrary, here we see intense feeling not only coexisting with, but arguably being given a more memorable shape through meticulous craftsmanship. The form didn't stifle the fire, it focused it, channeled it, and maybe made it resonate more deeply through time. Hashtag 3, the deeper strike of formed affection.
That's a powerful point, that the form actually focused the fire rather than quenching it. I think many of us intuitively think of emotional expression as a kind of release, a letting go. But what Lamentations suggests is almost the opposite, that true freedom in expression, the ability to truly convey the depths of what you're feeling, sometimes comes through discipline, through shaping. It's a counterintuitive idea, isn't it? That something shaped and considered could have a greater impact than something raw and immediate.
It absolutely is counterintuitive for many, and that's precisely why this source challenges us. This powerful example of Lamentations makes us rethink a really common belief. The idea that unpondered prayers are more real or passionate or heartfelt than prayers that are thoughtfully and earnestly and painfully poured out through a carefully crafted form. We often assume that the raw, unscripted prayer, the immediate cry from the soul, is automatically more authentic or more effective. But this thinking can limit us. This author introduces the idea that formed affection often strikes deeper, both into the reality being expressed and into the hearer. To illustrate this, he offers a compelling analogy of a grieving man. Imagine the immediate, spontaneous response when he first hears devastating news, perhaps that his wife and children have been tragically lost in an accident. Our author describes him throwing himself to the ground, crying out in torment, ripping his clothes, rubbing his head in ashes, until his energy completely ebbs into a pitiable no, no, no. This is utterly real emotion, unstudied, without conscious constraints or any design form. It's the rawest, most immediate outpouring of pain. And it is real. You cannot deny its authenticity in that moment. But then picture this same man a week later. The initial excruciating shock, that first blast of pain, has begun to recede slightly. The services are over. Perhaps the friends have departed, and he's left alone with the crushing weight of his loss. Now, instead of the acute, searing agony, there is a throb and ache of an amputated soul. It's a deep, settling grief that has taken hold, a constant companion. What does he do at this stage to express this ongoing, sustained sorrow? Our author suggests that between any periodic sobs, he reaches for a form to make his lamentation. This isn't a fresh, spontaneous cry of shock. This is something studied, crafted, pondered, full of strength. Perhaps it's a psalm he turns to, or a personal poem he writes, or maybe a structured prayer he composes. When the time comes for him to recite or read this lamentation, our source states that no one will perceive this formed grief as canned or artificial. On the contrary, it will strike deeper than the sobs. Why? Because it will show more of what he's brought up from the depths of his being. It's not just the immediate surface reaction anymore. It's the carefully processed, deeply felt, sustained sorrow. This example highlights that while initial, raw spontaneity is undeniably real and has its place, a sustained, deep sorrow, when channeled into a more impactful and revealing expression through intentional shaping, can have a peculiar depth. It conveys not just the immediate reaction, but the sustained, weighty experience of loss. Communicated with a kind of distilled clarity that can pierce the heart of the listener more effectively, it speaks to a different kind of truth, maybe a deeper reality of how pain settles and continues to affect us.
That analogy of the grieving man really brings it to life. It makes me think about how we often try to process our own complex emotions, whether it's grief, joy, or even anger. Sometimes the initial explosion of feeling is necessary, yes. But then comes the quiet, almost sacred work of trying to articulate it in a way that truly captures its essence. It's a journey from raw sensation to meaningful expression. And this leads us beautifully to a very vivid and instructive analogy that helps clarify this relationship between emotion and form. Emotions are like a river flowing out of one's heart. It's a wonderful image, isn't it? This flowing river suggests something natural, dynamic, ever moving within us, something that wells up from an inner source. But then the question naturally arises, if emotions are the river, what then is the form in this analogy?
In this analogy, the answer is quite simple and yet, well, quite telling. Form is like the riverbanks. And the reasoning behind this comparison is truly illuminating. Our author explains that without them, the riverbanks, the river runs shallow and dissipates on the plain. Imagine a river that simply spreads out endlessly across a flat, open landscape. It loses its current, its depth, its force. It becomes a wide, shallow, marshy expanse, ineffective for travel, maybe easily evaporated. This powerfully illustrates what can happen to emotions when they are expressed without the constraint or guidance of form. They can become superficial, lose their intensity, and fail to make a lasting impact. The feeling might be real, sure, but it doesn't achieve its full potential or penetrate as it could. It just washes over everything without leaving a mark. Conversely, the analogy states, but banks make the river run deep. This highlights the crucial positive role of form. By providing containment and direction, form allows emotions to gain depth and intensity. It channels the emotional current, preventing it from becoming scattered or lost. It gives it focus and force, allowing it to penetrate and portray truth more effectively and to strike the hearer with greater impact. It concentrates the feeling, making it more potent, more useful, perhaps more beautiful. It's not about limiting the flow, you see, but about directing it for maximum effect. This isn't just a theoretical idea for a deep dive. It's reflected in a deeply ingrained human tendency, one you can see throughout history and across cultures. Our author asks, why else have humans for centuries reached for poetry when we have deep affections to express? Think about it. When we experience deep love, intense sorrow, or awe-inspiring wonder, do we typically just shout out random words? Usually not. No, we often instinctively turn to poetry, to song lyrics, to structured language, to carefully chosen imagery, rather than just raw, unarticulated feeling. We try to find the right words, the right rhythm, the right cadence. This isn't a stifling. It's an intuitive recognition of form's channeling capacity, its ability to elevate and give substance, structure, and lasting memorability to our inner movements. We want the expression to be as worthy as the feeling. And this leads to an interesting irony. Our author points out that the creation of a form happens because someone feels a passion. It's not that form is externally imposed on emotion, like an unwelcome cage. Often, the very impulse to shape and refine emotional expression arises from the intensity of the feeling itself. It's the passion that seeks a worthy container, a way to be understood and felt by others. Therefore, it becomes ironic to fault form for a lack of genuine feeling when the true limitation is described as that dry spring, a lack of genuine passion in the heart to begin with. The problem isn't the channel or its banks, but the absence of the source. The banks merely show you if the river is flowing or not. Hashtag 5. The discipline of reality and the call to deep feeling.
That's such a clarifying metaphor. The idea that the very strength of the passion drives the creation of the form rather than being limited by it. That's a complete reframing for me. It means form isn't a cage for a bird, it's maybe the air currents that let it soar. It also makes me think about moments in my own life where I've tried to articulate something genuinely heartfelt, but without finding the right structure or words, it just dissipates, becomes a jumbled mess. It's almost like the feeling itself demands to be properly housed, you know? This conversation takes on an even more personal dimension as our author shares his own experience writing a poem titled The Innkeeper. This poem addresses the immense pain and suffering surrounding Herod's slaughter of baby boys, a truly horrific event, one of the darkest chapters in history. The author reflects on his own creative process in that moment, asking a very specific question of himself. Why does the poet bind his heart with such a severe discipline of form? Why strain to give shape to suffering? It speaks to the deliberate, often difficult effort involved in crafting emotion, particularly emotion related to such sorrow. It's not about making it easy. It's about making it meaningful, making it resonate.
And the author provides a deeply insightful and weighty answer to his own question. An answer that connects directly to the nature of reality itself, because reality has contours. This is a profoundly theological statement, especially within a reformed framework like ours. It suggests that truth and suffering, particularly spiritual realities, they aren't shapeless or amorphous concepts that we can mold to our whims. Not at all. They have specific boundaries, characteristics, and an inherent weight that demand careful, thoughtful, and disciplined expression. It's not something we can just casually brush over or express superficially. It cannot be diluted for our comfort. It must be faced. He then elaborates on the spiritual application of this principle. He states, God is who he is, not what we wish or try to make him be. His Son, Jesus Christ, is the great granite fact. His hard sacrifice makes it evident that our spontaneity needs Calvary-like discipline. This is a striking and challenging statement. It underscores that when we deal with truths about God's nature, about Christ's cross and his sacrifice, which were brutally real, excruciatingly costly, and historically specific, our own expression of these truths should reflect their gravity. These aren't topics for flippant or unconsidered communication. They demand a disciplined, even painstaking approach to convey their immense value and true nature. They compel us to wrestle with the form of their expression. It shouldn't be easy to just gloss over such weighty matters. The weight of the reality itself demands a rigorous articulation. Just as the cross was a hard reality, so must our engagement with it be disciplined. Now, applying this to ministry, the author makes a pointed observation. He notes that many pastors are not known for expressing deep emotions, particularly concerning the profoundest theological realities. He views this as a real shortfall, a genuine limitation in their ministry. It's not good, he argues, because leaders, especially those called to shepherd souls and proclaim divine truth, ought to experience and communicate intense feelings about the most central spiritual truths. Their expression should publicly demonstrate the intrinsic value of these realities, not just their propositional accuracy. It calls for a congruence between heart and sermon, between feeling and form, in presenting God's truth to his people. It's a call for pastors to not just say the truth, but to feel it intensely, and then to convey that feeling in a way that respects the truth's own contours and weight.
That's a powerful call, isn't it? To let the truth shape our affections, and then to let those shaped affections find their proper form. It's about being truly moved by the realities of God's Word, and then expressing that movement in a way that honors those realities. This brings us full circle to his ultimate plea, which he articulates with such clarity. Brothers, we must let the river run deep. This isn't just a poetic flourish. It's a direct, earnest call to action for those who lead and speak about the things of God. And really for all of us in our spiritual lives. He clarifies what this means. It is a plea for passion in the pulpit, passion in prayer, passion in conversation. It's a desire to see genuine, heartfelt engagement with divine truth permeate every aspect of spiritual communication. Not just for the sake of emotion, but for the sake of the truth itself. And crucially, he distinguishes this from thin, whipped-up emotionalism. He gives a simple illustrative example. Let's all stand up and smile. Right? He's not advocating for superficial displays of sentiment or manufactured enthusiasm, the kind that can be conjured on demand but lacks any genuine substance. He's looking for something far more substantial, something that comes from a genuine wellspring within, something that has been shaped by encounter with God's unchanging reality.
So what he's truly aspiring for is what he calls deep feelings in worthy forms from God-besotted hearts and minds. This phrase, it unites the two central themes we've discussed throughout this deep dive: authentic, God-centered passion with thoughtful, structured, and carefully considered expression. It's about a heart utterly devoted to God, filled with intense feeling for his truths, and then finding ways to channel those feelings into expressions that are fitting, dignified, and impactful. It speaks to a Christian maturity where the head and heart are not at war, but are instead allies in expressing God's glorious truth. This deep dive has consistently shown us that form is not an enemy of genuine feeling, but rather a channel. It's like the riverbanks we discussed. They don't impede the river, they make it flow with greater depth and intensity. Form allows the heart's deepest movements, its agony, its joy, its hope, its awe, to be conveyed with richness and lasting impact, preventing them from dissipating into a shallow, ineffective overflow. It's a call to bring our whole selves, our intellect and our affections, into the service of expressing divine truth to his glory. It invites us to consider that sometimes the most uninhibited expression comes from the most disciplined heart. Hashtag tag outro.
As we wrap up this deep dive, the central insight shines brightly. True depth of feeling is often best conveyed not through unbridled spontaneity alone, but through the discipline of form. This discipline shapes and amplifies rather than stifles the heart's true stirrings. It provides the banks for the river of emotion, allowing it to run deep and strong, impacting those who hear it and honoring the reality it seeks to express. So, as you consider this, what riverbanks might God be calling you to build around the deepest affections of your heart? How might you thoughtfully channel your joys, your sorrows, your hopes, or your worship, so that your own experience and expression might run deeper for His glory?